Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and welcome everybody to another episode of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. As always, we are off the heels of another basketball game from the Houston Cougars, number 5, Houston, and they just picked up their biggest win of the season up to this point, traveling up to Charlottesville, Virginia, and knocking down the number 2 Cavaliers in hostile territory. An impressive performance from freshman Jarris Walker at 17 points, 7 rebounds. Marcus Sasser and Tremont Mark each added 13 points, and Jawan Roberts also got into double figures with 10 points, and Jamal Shedd finished with 11 points and 4 assists. But before we get into game specifics, joining me as always, Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review, Da'Yon Dunlap. How are you two doing?
I'm doing great, man. How you guys doing?
All is well. All is well, man. Another
All
dub.
is well. It could be better if it wasn't for Delta, but we'll leave that on another note. But let's get right
No.
into
But
it.
real
Like I
quick,
mentioned,
Andy, real quick, explain what happened because you're not at the game. Let them know what happened.
I'm not in the game due to windshield wipers from a Delta flight. Apparently, well, it was raining when the plane was supposed to take off in Houston late afternoon on Friday afternoon, Friday, December 16th. Because of those wipers, because it was raining, it's a federal law for them to be working. It did not work on the plane. And apparently, it was a motor issue on the part of Delta Airlines that would take hours to fix. Long story short, the flight was delayed until I believe I was still getting alerts that it got pushed back to 7 in the morning this Saturday morning, and yeah, there was no point, there was no chance that I would be able to make it to the game. So instead, we watched it on TV. But it's okay. We're rocking with the punches because at the end of the day, like you always say, Kris, modern technology. Where are you currently, Kris? Because you're not in your usual spot.
Right. I'm in Dallas at a Dallas hotel. I'm here for a quadruple hitter tomorrow. College basketball involving Baylor and Texas women's hoops, as well as Stanford, USC, Arizona, and Washington State.
And that just goes to show it doesn't matter where we are, this show will continue and it will carry. But before we do want to give a shout out to our sponsors, because you see right there in the middle, we have a new sponsor on today's episode. But we'll start with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They are the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials that you saw if you were with us during the football portion of Let's Rage Coogs. The Anthony Jones Sackaf commercial that air sponsoring Star Pizza, or promoting Star Pizza, which is another one of our sponsors for today's episode. Star Pizza, Houston's best pizza since 1976, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Right now, after a big Cougs win, I'm sure you guys, a lot of fans are hungry. Make sure to stop by Star Pizza if you're in a mood for some awesome pizza, and then check it out. But the debut in their show here in Let's Rage Cougs, presented by the Saxenian Family, sponsor of today's episode, HOUNIL, who will be a season long sponsor. HOUNIL.com is a subscription based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and families. HOUNIL helps the Houston athletes benefit from the new name, image, and likeness rules. Athletes create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. What the players need is for you to subscribe. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money goes straight to the athletes. Subscribers will get a one of a kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on the national stage. Be sure to subscribe at HOUNIL.com. Once again, that's HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. But on that note, let's get right into the game specifics, because, like I mentioned at the top of the show, Jarvis Walker, he really, I know it's something that we've been talking about the last few episodes in regards to really his aggressiveness and being able to be much more of a force on the offensive side of things. And he did that tonight against the Cavaliers, and he had a really strong showing.
He was more comfortable. I mean, to everybody, looked like to us, to teammates, folks watching the game anywhere. He took 11 shots, which I would assume, having checked the season totals for him, is a season high for him, 11 field goal attempts. He made 6. He had a great step back shot. He was aggressive a lot. He did have a turnover there that was kind of overpassing, but then he led to great passing, open assist, open three-pointer to Tremont Mark, who buried it. So this was his most complete game thus far. And as Kelvin Sampson touched on, he's a freshman. He'll be fine. Throughout this season, he's going to develop, continue to improve. I think we saw a glimpse of his total skill set today. And then we'll just keep playing games. We'll see how many times he does the rest of the season.
Yeah, that word comfortable is the word that stuck out to me when I watched him play. And he was more assertive. No second guessing himself. Whatever decision he made it quickly and assertively, whether it's taking a shot, whether it's making a pass, whether it's to drive and try to look for his own. And so those are the two things that stood out to me from Jared's performance. Just being comfortable on the floor, looked like he was seeing the game well, and being assertive in his decision making. Whatever he was doing, he was very assertive in doing so. In our last episode, I talked about when will we have a game where all three of our guards played well, and I think this was the game. I think all
Today
three
was it.
guards, yeah, it was it. All three guards played really well. The starting five played really well, all in double figures. But I think just that different element that we got when Jarris is aggressive really gives Houston another level that they can get to.
And you touched
Chris,
on the day on. Coogs starting five was all in double figures.
yeah.
First time ever against a Tony Bennett coach team, Virginia coach team, that the opponent starting five all scored in double figures. So very
We
impressive for the
think alike,
Cougs.
Chris, because that was exactly what I was about to go to, and chime in from one of our watchers, one of our viewers, watching Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family, streaming live on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. NRG Texan said, "We saw Jarris Walker today. Yeah, he's a freshman, but he made grown man plays today. Pressure three ball was nice, but that fadeaway rainbow over the defender was an move, period." Wanda
Yeah.
pokes at Jarris, looks like he got that mud in his blood that coach wanted him to get. I know we talked about that a few episodes ago, but let's touch on the guards. And Da'Yon, you brought up that point. Absolutely, this is at least so far early in the season. It's got to be the most. I mean, complete's not the right word, but certainly the best performance all three guards have had at the same time early on the season. And it couldn't come at a better game when it comes to the high caliber opponent that they played. I think overall, Jamal Shed, Tremont Mark, and Marcus Sasser, especially Sasser, kind of in the first half, he kind of helped give Houston that push as they made their rally and they created some separation heading into halftime. And then late, I mean, Tremont Mark and Jarvis Walker as well, even Marcus Sasser, a couple times they were able to shut the door with key baskets when Virginia tried to make that rally towards the late of the second half. And Jamal Shed was just kind of consistency overall, and he had some nice plays too to be able to stop the bleeding a lot of times when Virginia would try to make runs to get back in this game.
The Cougs took turns. Virginia, that's what it seemed like. Virginia started out the game 9-zip. Was not a great start, obviously, for the Cougs, but Marcus Sasser hit 3 threes, and then Jarris Walker kind of fit in, and then Jamal Shed had his moments, and then Jamon closed it out from the foul line. So it was a good overall team win. We can pick at some defensive breakdowns here and there, which I think everybody saw and noticed. Still got to get better communicating on high screens and things like that. But 12th game of the season, I'm going to be petty. Guys, give me a second of being petty. Okay. I'm glad the Cougs won this game to shut up all those haters out there who say, well, the Cougs don't play anybody in non-conference. Who do they play? They don't play anybody in America, blah, blah, blah. Well, they won at second-rate Virginia today. Case closed.
Yeah, and I think the guards play complementary basketball within each other and within the system. Because there were times where, Virginia's defense forced you to be patient in the pick and roll because they extended where the guard must dribble out an extra dribble, and then once they passed it down to Jarris in the middle, he can go 2-on-1, and where he made a lot of great decisions today, whether it's getting into his floater or creating for J1. And J1, he didn't really score much when they threw it down to him on the block one time that I can recall, but he was great in his activity and catching and finishing. And so, but the guards, man, they really play complementary basketball with one another. It was times where early when Jamal, the team was struggling and he would just get inside, make a floater. Or it was one time where Marcus, I think, missed his first 2 or 3 shots, and Tremont got a pick and roll in which he got to his strong hair, broke down the defense, and made a pass to a corner to the Marcus, got him a wide open look. They kind of jump started him, and so I think they all really played complementary basketball together and complement each other, like Christian said. As far as not, I don't kind of taking turns, but whenever the play was there, each one of them made the play when it presented itself. And so I think the chemistry is still boding well. But one thing that stuck out to me is the rotation. Coach kind of played with it last week, and this week it was a totally different rotation. I'm sure we'll get into that whenever you want to get into it, Andy.
For sure. And I think the key for that game, I think if you look at the first 5 minutes when Virginia got out to that 9-0 lead, it kind of seemed like Houston was timid a bit. And I mean, this was really their first I guess you can count Oregon, and Oregon, it was a much more different game, especially in terms of how the Ducks played defense against Houston. But Virginia, they looked like the more aggressive team for the first 5 minutes. And then after that first kind of media timeout, things just kind of switched. And really, Houston, like you said, it was kind of a mirror of the Alabama game. It looks like Houston kind of took that playbook because it looked like they were spreading out. And that's really when they killed them, when they were able to get into the paint, whether it was off screens, being able to get, like you said, Da'Yon into Jarvis Walker, who, I mean, he was sensational being able to be a playmaker once he caught the ball into the paint. He set up Jawan Roberts, and even I can't remember who was the one that set up Javier Francis, who really got things going whenever Houston started to make that comeback early on. I mean, that was interesting too, because for the second straight game, let's get right into those rotations. Francis was the first players off the bench for Houston, and like you alluded to, they only dumped down the ball once to Jawan Roberts in the post, and it did not look pretty. He shot the hook shot and it ended up going over the backboard, and I believe it hit the shot clock. But they were able to settle down after that, and then from the guard perspective, Emmanuel Sharp, once again, the first guard off the bench for Houston. No Terrence Arsenal in this game, which I found surprising.
It's surprising. I think as of right now, December 17th, Coach Sampson plays the guys he's most comfortable with. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Emmanuel Sharp has improved enough defensively to not be a major minus when he's on the floor. And I'm not taking shots at the folks, but, today was an example of Emmanuel not being a sniper. Okay. The shots he took, he missed.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a good spacer, and his defense was solid. It wasn't an embarrassment of let's go at Emmanuel Sharp and take turns beating him off the dribble. He did a good job defensively. Javier was the first big off the bench, but then Coach went to Reggie Chaney, and Reggie was more reliable, and I think Coach just felt more comfortable with him against an experienced Virginia team, and that may change, based on the opponents going forward. But I think Coach Sampson played the guys he felt comfortable with. And Terrence Arstow next week against McNeese may see more minutes. But today against Virginia, Coach Sampson played who he felt most comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's well said. He definitely played who he felt most comfortable with, but I still think JVA could have had a bigger impact. Just his activity, he looks different when he's on the court. Like you can tell that if he would have played more minutes than he played, he would have had a bigger impact. But to Emmanuel getting those minutes off the bench, although he didn't score, I still think his confidence offensively, of course, like Kris just alluded to, you have to do those things and prove that you're going to do those cultural things as far as give maximum effort on the defensive end and compete, et cetera, to earn your minutes. But I think the confidence that he brings them offensively and probably the consistency, because I just, from what he's put on film, I'm sure it's enough tape that you know that he has the ability and the confidence to let it go and to make it. And so I'm not sure if there's something we go. I know it's a game-to-game basis, but I think he has proven that. And I think he can continue to build on that as he's continuing to kind of find his role, because now his role seems to have changed a little bit. And so as he settles in, I think he'll start to having a more and more impact. But no Ramon Walker today as well. And so Coach Sampson's still pulling the strings and kind of painting the picture for what this team is to come, because it's only 12 games in, and he's still kind of defining the roles and kind of letting the players define the roles with their play. So that's another making of a great coach as well.
That's a great point
on in the season.
Da'Yon. Sorry, Andy, to cut you off. It's
Okay.
early in the season, but it's a great point Da'Yon made that coach is playing the players, or he played the players who really earn the minutes in practice. So that's what it comes down to. I mean, it's not a dig at other players, but you're seeing Emmanuel. We have to take it and assume that Emmanuel's getting things done in practice to deserve the minutes and to move ahead of Ramon Walker and right now Terrence Arsenault for game minutes. Competition makes teams better. So if you're not getting it done in practice, then what do you need to do to get minutes in the games? Do better in practice. So Emmanuel Sharp is seeing that, and plus Emmanuel was healthy. He went through a few nicks and issues earlier in the season where he didn't get a lot of time and minutes. So he's improved month to month. I think he's a good example of what Coach Sampson wants from the team, month to month. Improvement from October to November, November to December. We're midway through December, and then we'll see the team get better in January and then onward. But it's a good building block. It's a good win for the team's confidence if that was ever lacking without doubt from a Kelvin Sampson team. A good road win at Virginia, the second-ranked team in the country. The Cougs pretty much dominated the second half, except for a 2-minute, stubbing of toes.
Yep.
That game was pretty much in hand for the whole second half. That is very impressive for this team because the Cougs are still young, in a lot of key spots. So this is a building block win for them going forward, and that's the job to do. Just keep building on it going forward.
And I like King Jaja's comment about Jarius. He definitely looked confident. But like Christian said, I don't think the confidence never really goes anywhere. I think he's always confident. I just don't know if he's as assertive and sure of himself as far as what to make, what to do, what to shoot, what to pass. And today it was no second guessing. He made tough shots, especially out in the one comment we had, that fadeaway. That was an NBA shot, 100%. And so as long as he just doesn't overthink the game, I think maybe it's slowing down for him a little bit more. He's going to continue to develop.
That's a great point. And I think being comfortable is part of, and I think he's trying to figure out the best way to fit.
Yeah.
Being one of the new faces on the team, he might have he has a lot of talent based on ranking stars, all those kind of things, but he still has to fit on the team. And I think that's what he's trying to do. And today was his best example of fitting offensively and defensively.
Real quickly, I do like to remind everyone that's viewing or listening to the audio-only versions that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. The Saxenian Family, the primary sponsor for Let's Rage Coogs throughout the remainder of the regular season for the men's basketball season, as well as into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. Once again, thank you for helping us and tuning in with the unofficial Houston postgame show of men's basketball and football. And a big shout out to our sponsors, starting with HOUNIL, who are making their debut as a sponsor on today's episode. And big shout out to Ryan Monceau, who's kind of the brains behind HOUNIL and GoCougs.com. And GoCougs.com just tweeted out that Houston moves back to number one in the KenPom ratings with this big win over Virginia. But on that note, I do like to give a shout out to HOUNIL, who, like I mentioned, is making their debut. As the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. Those schools have fans that have built huge name, image, and likeness groups to their athletes' name, image, and likeness compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over the University of Houston, where NIL is still in its infancy. But you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe to player-created content like essays, videos, podcasts, and get access to private events with UH players. Players are compensated for creating content, and fans get an inside look at their lives. Plans start at just $20 a month, and that money helps the Cougars retain players to stay at the top in basketball and build momentum in football. HOUNIL.com. Subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from Cougar athletes. Subscribe today at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. And also a big shout out to our sponsors with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. Again, they are the entity behind the Star Pizza commercials with the Anthony Jones, Sac Ave, and Big Hawk. If you've seen throughout our early shows in the football season, they were promoting Star Pizza, who is another one of our sponsors with various locations across the Houston area. Star Pizza is Houston's best pizza since 1976. Be sure to check them out online at starpizza.net and check out the amazing items they have available in their individual restaurants. Kris, I'm going to toss it over to you because honestly, I didn't notice Joe Mendez, again, watching live on YouTube, said, did anybody notice that Terrence had what looked like a brace on his right leg? And he speculated on that. I did not notice that, but we haven't heard anything in regards to injury with Arsenal.
I did notice that. I saw him, the one time I saw him on the bench, he was already standing up. So I didn't see him with a brace on his leg at all. I had heard anything from the team about an injury or anything of that sort. Well, we can find out, reach out to the department and see if they'll tell us. But, I still believe, barring injury, Terrence Arsenault's shot is still kind of come and go right now. And lately it's been not been good. So he may not have got a lot of minutes today anyway because of his inexperience. And we really need to, for now, Emmanuel Sharp's time being with the program since January, I think gives him a definite advantage over Terrence. He's been there almost a year. to learn the culture, learn the game, be more comfortable in his skin, and then, as Da'Yon says, just look more confident and comfortable on the floor than Terrence is. Terrence has been here half that time that Emmanuel has, and I think that makes a difference.
And another thing that I was just thinking about is, like you just mentioned, he was here longer, but he had the opportunity to kind of sit on the bench while Terrence got those early minutes in which to get those mental reps and had the opportunity to add more and learn more mentally. And then now that he's inserted into the lineup even more, he can tie that mental up with the physical as far as what he learned over that period of time. And now that gives Terrence the opportunity to kind of sit back and look at the game from a different lens. But all this is just into developing and letting your players develop in their role, because like Coach Sim says often, each game will tell its own story. If you watch it, it'll tell you what to do. And so I'm sure there are going to be games going down the line where Terrence comes off the bench and has a huge impact and continues to show his development. But I think as Coach Sampson still just figuring out what each player have and what they can bring to this year's team and letting them define their role. And so, Coug fans don't overreact. I think it's Coach Sampson just working his magic and seeing what's best for this team.
And the team still played, let me see, eight or nine guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just think about Ramon Walker didn't play, Terrence didn't play, how deep this team is. Okay, so there might be, case in point today, there will be games where your coach does not go 10 deep or 11 deep. Because as Da'Yon says, Coach Sampson says, it wasn't warranted in that particular matchup. It might be different next game to go 10 deep. But today, against an experienced Virginia team, he went with the guys he thought could get the job done, that he trusted more.
Yep.
An 8-man rotation in a tough outing in hostile territory against Virginia. I want to kind of transition over to the defensive side of things and what you guys saw from the Cougars in that aspect, because when you look at the stats, Virginia, again, like you mentioned, they got off to a pretty hot start. It looked like they couldn't miss early on in the first half, not only jumping up to that 9-0 advantage, but then also being able to respond when Houston had cut it to 2. But overall for the game, Houston was able to hold them to just 41.7 shooting from the field, 20 of 48 from the field goal percentage or field goal shooting overall, and they were just 6 of 22 from 3 after starting 3 of 6. That's an overall 27.3 3-point shooting field goal percentage. Just overall, how do you guys feel like Houston did being able to contain Virginia? I don't know, you guys mentioned, for the most part, they controlled most of this game except towards that 2-3 minute stretch towards the end of the second half.
The defense to start the game was not good. Was not good enough. It was Virginia got a lot of, and this is I think I've noticed and noticing. First half, especially tonight, was another example of it. The Cougs went for too many shot fakes, too many pump fakes. Jamal Shea gave up he went for the pump fake. Kia Clark hit a 3-pointer with the shot clock winding down. Jamal, just stay on your feet, stay on the floor. The clock is winding down. Kia Clark has to shoot the ball, so pump fake it. Things like that happened in the first half too much. They did a better job of staying on the floor, not going for those fakes in the second half. And they did not allow as many open looks for Virginia. The Cougs did a better job of contesting the jumpers. And percentages say if you contest the shot, get a hand up, more times than not, that player is going to shoot a lower percentage than they do against wide open looks.
Kris hit it right on the head. They contested all the shots early on. They were going too many pump fakes. I'm sure Coach Sampson and the staff probably got the team to hone in on the scouting report, know which players to run out on and contest. Because I'm hearing certain stats during the game, like some of the players are strictly 3-point shooters. And so I'm sure that they kind of settled down a little bit, paid attention to the scouting report, and they really just played on a string and they played together. I mean, great rotations. You got a couple of lapses, but that's just good ball movement, good offense. But overall, I think the defense just really played together, and it's always spearheaded by the guards. I think the way they pressure the basketball with this Jamal and Marcus, the way they kind of speed up those guards, not allow them to get into their sets comfortably, and then with the traps and the rotations, it kind of speeds up the opposing team in their half-court set, and it forces them to be patient and really execute. In Houston, I mean, it's tough, especially when they're really contesting every single shot. There's not many open shots. And so they did a great job of just playing tough team defense and getting out to the shooters, because Virginia did not shoot the ball well. And Houston actually rebounded the ball really well today, and so that was another thing that Houston had in their favor. But Virginia's are typically not typically, but they're all a smaller team versus some of the teams that Houston played this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. You mentioned Houston out rebounded Virginia 30-26 overall for the game, and they also had a slight edge in the offensive rebounding category when they finished 7-6, just narrowly being able to out rebound Virginia. But that was key too. And it was under the 4 minute mark, I believe, when Houston answered. I can't remember exactly when. I think it had been when Houston scored the 54th point, and Tremont Mark got the offensive rebound, and they got a second chance opportunity out of it. And just saw this tweet from Jamal Shed, Jarris Walker. That's it. That's the tweet at Jarris W. So Jamal Shed knows, shouting out to freshmen. But before we transition, once again, I'd like to remind everyone that this is Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. Saxenian Family is the primary sponsor for Let's Reach Coogs for the remainder of the men's basketball regular season and into the American Athletic Conference postseason tournament. Also give a shout out to our other sponsors, beginning with Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They are behind those Star Pizza commercials. Who's Star Pizza? Houston's best pizza since 1976. Both Hoop and Holler and Star Pizza have been a sponsor of Let's Reach Coogs since day one, with multiple locations across the Houston area. Be sure to check out Houston's best pizza since 1976. And if you're in a rush, be sure to order online first. And also a shout out to HOUNIL. Once again, HOUNIL.com is a subscription-based name, image, and likeness model that benefits both Cougar student athletes and fans. HOUNIL helps Houston student athletes benefit from the new NIL rules. Athletes create original content in their own words, giving subscribers insight into their lives on and off the court. That money goes to UH athletes. Subscribers will get one-of-a-kind content straight from the players while helping the Houston Cougars compete on the national stage. Be sure to subscribe at HOUNIL.com. And as always, go Cougs. Looking ahead at the road Houston has, they're beginning to wind down. There's only one non-conference game left in the season, and that comes Wednesday, 7 p.m. inside of the Fertitta Center against McNeese before they open up the American Athletic Conference play on December 28th at Tulsa. So really, this was a huge opportunity for Houston to not to look ahead and over McNeese, but really Virginia was the biggest challenge, biggest opponent left in the non-conference slate, and they were able to get an impressive win on the road in hostile territory. And like you said, Kris, take off that stigma that had they lost to Virginia, it had been, well, when they played tough opponents in Alabama and Virginia, they couldn't get it done.
It's a big win. It's a quadrant one win, and that won't go away. You know, Virginia being an ACC, being an upper tier of the ACC, should not fall too. I doubt they fall out of the quadrant one part. And plus, there's a road win as well, so that helped also in the metrics. It's a good, solid win. McNeese, Coach Sampson will treat McNeese like any other game, any other opponent. Should be a win. It's a home game for the Cougs. Should be a big win. So, but he won't see it that way. You know, take every opponent as it is and respect the opponent. And that's key to maintaining the culture of the program. Respect every opponent. But it's a big win today for the Cougs at Virginia. And then after that conference play, and there's not a lot of great teams in the American, but it's still a team that if you don't play well, especially on the road, that they can beat you. But first things first, win at McNeese, and then focus on closing out the last season in the American after that.
Real quickly, down before tossing it over to you, Houston now currently 3-1 in quad one games this season, and people forget that Kent State currently is considered a quad one opponent.
Kent State, Alabama, Virginia, who else?
St. Mary's on the neutral site was considered a quad one game too.
Yeah, I think this is a big win, really for the psyche, I think, of the team. I know they probably won't admit it, but when you lose a tough game at home to Alabama, and then you playing another top-ranked team, you want to have that psyche knowing that you can beat these teams. You know that you can compete. I don't think there's ever any question or any doubt whether you compete, but you want to prove that this year's team that you can win those type games, especially on the road. I think that bodes well for the psyche of the team. It just gives them more confidence going forward. I think now you look at the schedule coming up, Nick State won't be too tough of a game. I think they should handle them. Then you get into the nitty-gritty of the American, which, like Kris said, there are not a lot of great teams, but a lot of teams there that are going to be looking to compete, and they're going to be teams looking to knock off Houston. Houston's going to be the highest ranked team. I'm sure Memphis probably gets some rankings after they beat Auburn and barely lost to Alabama, so I expect them to move up into the top 25. But other than that, Houston's going to be the biggest draw on a game-to-game basis. But this team, another thing on offensively that they did was today, they had really good spacing, a lot of room for their guards to penetrate and kick it to the outside. And so they had great spacing, great movement, great ball movement, and also they did a good job of getting out in transition. One time, J1 got a board, great outlet pass to Marcus. He really was a one-man fast break, finished on the left side, got fouled, made the end one. And so they continue to do those things offensively, play fast when the opportunity presents itself, move the ball in the half court and not get too stagnant and play complementary each other with the guards. This team is going to be hard to beat, especially with Jarris, who's playing more assertive, gaining more confidence. Man, this team is going to be really, really good by the time next year comes around, the calendar year.
And real quick, receive word, Terrence is not injured. So I reached out to someone on the team, and Terrence is not injured. So we have to say that because there's no Andy was not able to be in Virginia, so we don't have post game. I'm not sure if there's going to be any post game video anywhere, on the UH site or anyone else there. So we'll just give you what we got and all the info we can get, as best we can for this game.
For sure. And don't remind me about that road thing, but we'll do it like you said.
Wasn't your fault, man.
We got. Absolutely. But regardless, the show must go on, and that's exactly what we're doing here on a Saturday afternoon for Let's Rage Coogs, presented by the Saxenian Family. We'll do our final reads and kind of close things out and put a bow on this game against number 2 Virginia. First, we do need to shout out our sponsor, starting with HOUNIL, which, like I said throughout the show, they are the debut, or it is their debut show, being sponsors of Let's Rage Coogs, and they will be a season-long sponsor for the rest of the men's basketball season, and even that one bowl game that the football team will play in less than a week. But beginning with HOUNIL, as the Cougars move to the Big 12, Houston will be competing with national players in basketball like Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, and more. Those schools have fans that have built out huge name, image, and likeness group to get their athletes NIL compensation. That gives them a huge advantage over the University of Houston, where NIL is still in its infancy, but you can help Cougar athletes by getting involved. Be sure to go to HOUNIL.com to subscribe for player-created content like essays, videos, podcasts, and even get access to private events with U of H players. Players are compensating for creating content, and fans get an inside look at their lives. So it's a win-win for both sides, and plans start at just $20 a month, and that money helps the Cougars retain players to stay at the top in basketball and help build momentum in football. HOUNIL.com. Be sure to visit them, HOUNIL.com. Once again, as subscribers get one-of-a-kind content straight from the Cougars athletes. Subscribe today at HOUNIL.com. And be sure, as always, to say go Coogs in regards to the Cougar family. Coogs helping Coogs. But Kris, in regards to, no, I forgot, still one more read. Hoop and Holler, the Houston Cougars Micro Collective. They've been with us since day one, and they are the entity behind those Star Pizza commercials with the Anthony Jones, Big Hawk, and our other sponsor for today's episode, Star Pizza, with various locations across the Houston area. Be sure to check out Houston's best pizza since 1976, and be sure to visit them on the web at starpizza.net. That's starpizza.net. You can even order online. But Kris, looking ahead, if you had to nitpick, and maybe not nitpick, but if there's one area of concern or maybe one weakness that Virginia really hurt the Cougars, what would that have been at following this game?
First half, probably the passes, the over-the-top pass to the big man in the paint, when the Cougs didn't rotate, didn't communicate, and that was an issue a little bit. But it seemed to be corrected. Main thing was the Cougs, and I think some of these younger guys, they don't talk well enough. They don't talk enough. They don't communicate well enough on where you're supposed to be in the defensive coverage, because we can see it when it breaks down. But when it's clicking, when everybody's on the same string, you can tell no breakdowns. Everybody's rotations are tight, but man, when there's a breakdown in it, and somebody gives up an easy layup or an over the top pass, somebody was supposed to rotate to that and be there to defend that. So that is an issue which you expect to have from younger teams and teams with inexperience. So that's something going forward that they can fix.
Down. What about on your end?
Yeah, I think turnovers. I think some of them are live ball turnovers, which Virginia was able to get out and get some transition buckets. But when Houston takes care of the ball offensively and doesn't give their opposing teams transition opportunities and opportunities to score without their defense set, then they're even harder to beat. And so I think turnovers early, well, late in the game, that comes to mind is Houston just has to clean up. If they can just take care of the ball and not give some of those turnovers, then they were fouling a lot too. I don't know if it's the referees, however the game is being called. Houston was called for a lot of fouls, and so just things like that. You don't want opposing team taking a lot of free throws, especially if they're a really good free throw shooting team. And so you got to play tough, sound defense, not turn it over. All things coaches going to say all the time, but I mean, you really got to do it. And if they can do those things, get those turnovers down even more, then especially late in the game, a Jamal turnover, that was the turnover you really can't see from your point guard. I'm sure Coach Sampson is really going to light into him about that, because especially just from that position and that person who holds such a huge responsibility on the team. But yeah, those are a couple of things that Virginia was able to take advantage of to keep them kind of in the game towards the end.
And that's a great point. That's one of the categories that Virginia actually explored here, ended up winning or having an advantage over Houston. Despite having more turnovers than the Cougars, Virginia had 12 points off of Houston's 8 turnovers, while Houston was only able to turn Virginia's 10 turnovers into 9 points. So that's something that the Cavaliers had an edge in. And like you alluded to, Da'Yon, and what King Jaja mentioned, that steal by Clark on Shed can't happen. I think that was the one that cut it to just 6 and really woke up that crowd in Virginia and gave the Cavaliers a bit of really, they were right in the game with just under 4 minutes to go. But that's something to clean up. But as we start to wind things down, once again, the final score, Houston comes out victorious 69-61. The one other thing I did want to add, that's a great point in regards to the foul, and it goes back to Kris, what you alluded to in regards to staying on their feet. I mean, this game in particular, towards the end, Houston was able to have kind of that 8 points, 10-point cushion for after once they got onto the 3-minute mark. But Jamal Shed had 3 fouls, Juwan Roberts had 3 fouls, Walker had 3 fouls, and Reggie Chaney fouled out with 5. That's something that in a much closer game could come back and bite Houston.
And that's the issue. They have to do a better job of, for most of the game, they did a good job of it, defending without fouling. And it's on the players to adjust to how the game is called. You cannot blame the refs if you hold. If you got beat on the perimeter and then try to play catch up and tug on the jersey, that's a foul. That's your fault. That's not the ref's fault. That's you getting beat and trying to recover. So they got to do a better job of defending without fouling. And we're finding the little things to improve upon in an 8-point road win over the second-ranked team in the country. That's good to do, to learn from a win. It's great to do that, learning from a win.
Another thing that games like this and early in the season, you get those opportunities, because there's going to be times later on in conference, particularly probably in the tournament, where you get in foul trouble. And some of these younger players, whether it's Terrence, whether it's Emmanuel, whether it's Ramon, whether it's JVA, have those early year experience and be ready for the moment. And so as Coach Sampson still plays with the lineup, still plays with the rotation, still kind of figuring out what role is going to be defined in this team's year, you always got to be ready, because you never know how the game is gonna come about, especially when tournament time and even conference play comes about.
Absolutely. And once again, the final score, Houston comes out victorious 69-61 on a Saturday afternoon showdown up in Charlottesville, Virginia. Jarris Walker, the freshman, finished with 17 points and 7 rebounds for Houston. He also had 4 assists, and Marcus Astor, Tremont Mark each had 13 points each. Jamal Shed had 11 points, and Juwan Roberts had 10. Like I said earlier in the show, Houston's next opponent will be Wednesday night against McNeese. Home game to finish the non-conference slate before they have a week off and they prepare for the American Athletic Conference opener, the final American Athletic Conference opener for the Houston Cougars men's basketball team, and it'll open up on the road against Tulsa December 28th. But Kris, I'll toss it over to you. As always, thank you for allowing us to use your platform here on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel for the streaming of Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family. Where can people find you, and any final points you'd like to add?
It's always my pleasure to be a part of Let's Rage Coogs and having it on the Houston Roundball Review channel. Onward and upward. It's good to be part of the unofficial post game for Houston Cougars men's basketball and football. And we're going to do bigger and better things going forward in the Big 12 as well, because as far as we know, we're one of the few outlets where a team potentially in the Big 12 does post game shows. So we're trying to do better going and forward, and we will. But you can find me on HoustonRoundballReview.com, Houston Roundball Review on Instagram. Twitter is VHR Review. So take away from the game, big road win. Good to see Jarris Walker play his most complete game of his young college career. He seemed really comfortable on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively, and that's a good building block for him and the team going forward.
Da'Yon, where can people find you, sir?
Find me on all social media platforms at Da'Yon Dunlap. Glad to be a part of this great show as we continue to grow. It's only going to get bigger and better, so you better join and jump on board while you can. But great win. Like Kris just said, great win. I think the team needed it. I think this team is about to go on the road now. Though I'm looking at the schedule, I think things are about to start unfolding. Houston will have to go on a long road, a winning streak right now. And hopefully, got to take it a game at a time, though. Not looking ahead, got to take it a game at a time. But this one was definitely a great sign to get a top 5 win over an undefeated team to give them the first loss of the season. All 5 started in double figures. So it was a well-rounded game completely from the entire team.
And on my end, you can find me on Twitter at Aonis_5. And more importantly, be sure to follow us on YouTube in regards to Pod Slamma Jamma. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We're just short of 600 subscribers. Once again, we're still on the road to 1,000. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube as you see on the screen. That's PAWDSLAMAJAMA on YouTube. And as always, if you're interested in being a sponsor here for Let's Rage Coogs presented by the Saxenian Family, be sure to hit us up at letsragecoogs@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Let's Rage Coogs and on Twitter at Pod Slam Jamma. As always, this has been a presentation for Let's Rage Coogs. Once again, Kris, thank you for allowing us to use your platform like you mentioned. It's only grow once we get into the Big 12, because I mean, just look at last week when Houston and Alabama, that post game show did over now 2.1 thousand views and counting. So we're continuing to grow onward and upward, as we always say. Once again, the final score from Charlottesville, Houston victorious against number 2 Virginia, number 5 Houston victorious over number 2 Virginia 69-61. And Houston will be back Wednesday night following Houston's game against McNeese. Thank you guys, and as always, we'll see you next time.
Go